Hi guys, welcome to tutorial 4 for the Iris Pro Training Series PC-9A. In this tutorial we're going to look at flying the circuit. So we're going to dive right in. Big one here is we're going to have to do a little bit of ground school work before we jump over into the simulation again. First off, what is a circuit? Well, a circuit's rather obvious, just like a racecourse circuit or the like. It's basically a circular pattern if you use the term circular by meaning that you return to the original starting point. Then an aircraft flies when it's planning on using the runway again and again and again, or planning on landing. So if we look here, we can see what's known as a normal left-hand traffic circuit. Most circuits are going to be left-hand unless specifically stated otherwise by charts or the like. In the case of Pierce where we're flying, it's actually on the runway we're actually on, it's a right-hand circuit, because the chart, as I'll show in a little bit, actually has a ruling stating that you can't fly east of runway 18 left. But as you can see, in the normal traffic pattern, you take off, you enter a left-hand turn, and enter what's known as the crosswind leg. You fly this, and then turn, and enter the downwind leg. You then fly all the way down, do another 90-degree turn, enter the base leg, fly that before turning onto final approach and your landing. This is a standard civilian traffic pattern. It's basically a rectangle that you overlay on the ground below you. However, in the military, it's typically done slightly different. We're going to look at that here. So this is a military circuit, and most notably, this is the military circuit for the PC-9. As you can see here, we take off, climb to 1,000 feet AGL, turn, come out on the downwind leg, do our landing checks, turn onto our base leg, and then straight into final. The difference here, as you can see, is rather than a square pattern, we're actually flying more of an oval shaped. It's an important thing to remember. The other thing is, in this image, we can see a guide to what the picture outside looking at our wing should be. So if we're in the pattern correctly, we should see something like this, which we'll get into in a little bit once we're in. We also get some rough estimates on the speeds and the like we should be flying at the various points. So once we level off, we should be able to pull back to about 15 psi on our torque. Maintain 40 to 45 degree angle of bank through the turn. Maintain 140 knots indicated airspeed. Do our landing checks, such as making certain we're all ready, which we'll cover in a minute. Then, as we turn, just before we turn onto our base, we bring our takeoff flaps down, our gear down. We're going, and our speed, reducing it down to about 110 knots. And at the same time, slowly descending as we're coming through. So we should lose about 200 feet as we come into the turn, and by the time we're coming out onto our finals, we should be above 400 feet, but below the 1,000 feet, and maintaining 110 knots. And then we just bring it down along the guide slope for the threshold at 85 knots. Of course, even the best of pilots can get it wrong. Now, if we look at Pierce, the reason we're flying a right-hand pattern rather than a left-hand pattern at Pierce is, if you notice, all the items for the actual airbase are on the east side. And if you read through the notes on the charts, which are down here, also available on the actual AIP Air Services website, there's a big notice basically saying that you can't fly east of runway 18 left or 36 right. And of course that would mean you can't fly a left-hand pattern on 18 left. Instead, you've got to fly a right-hand pattern. The other thing to be aware of when you're flying the pattern at Pierce is that you've actually got just down here Perth terminal airspace. So basically you've got to keep yourself nice and tight in against Pierce. Though we should not be flying anywhere near 11 DME. So we don't have to worry about it. So with that being said, let's take a look at some of the checklists we're going to have to check. Of course, we're going to have to monitor all our items. The big one we want to make certain of is our landing checklists down here. So pre-landing we want to be below 150 knots, the air brake in, the landing gear down in 3 greens, the flaps as required, brakes, well we can't actually simulate that other than making certain that we get the little marker, and that our fuel's balanced, and then nominate what our threshold speed's going to be, set our bug for it, and if we've been using the smoke, make certain it's off. And if we're landing on an unsealed runway, make certain our inertial separator's on. So, let's go fly a standard pattern. And then, do a touch and go. So, this is where we left tutorial 3. We've just taken off, we're flying out, we've accelerated a little bit, and we're about 1,000 feet above the ground. So of course the first thing we're going to do as we unpause, we're going to throttle back a little bit. We don't want to be going quite this fast. And we're going to trim the aircraft. Now we're going to enter a 45-degree bank turn. I'm actually going to kick my track IR in here. You'll notice that I've come in a little shallow. So we're going to come around here. I'm a little way out. We can see that by looking at the picture that we've got. So if I look out my wing, it doesn't match that little indicator that we got before when we're looking at the patterns image. But that's okay. We're not too far out, so we can still fly the standard pattern. We just need to remember that we are a little bit further out on track than normal. So big one here is we want to trim the aircraft out. We don't want to be fighting it. And we're on our downwind leg at the moment. We're not exactly completely straight either, so let's get ourselves straight up. So we're just passing the threshold on 1.8 left there. So the way I normally judge where I need to turn to start my base turn is basically about 2 wing roots back. So we're just coming up on where I'd start mine now. So at this point I want to bring my gear down, my flaps, to take off. And basically brought the throttle almost all the way back to idle, nose down, and I'm just letting the aircraft bring itself around. Watching the altitude at the same time. We don't want to bleed off too much. We're looking, basically just trying to bring that nose around. I'm going to bring the flaps down to landing. We don't want to go any slower than that. We're at our threshold speed. So we want to continue to bring it down, watching the picture in front of us, watching our speed. And of course normally you've got the PAPI lights as well, but because of how I've got my scenery set up in at the moment, we don't actually have them here, because I'm running prepared. And as we see the level out, we enter a nice soft little flare. Just let the aircraft bring itself to the ground. So now we're on the ground. Let the front nose gear come down, bring the flaps to takeoff, power back up to max, rotate, gear up, flaps up, and we're going to bring the throttle back because we don't want to get too much speed up. Now we want to maintain runway heading and climb back up to 1,200 feet. So we're at 1,200 feet again, and we start our turn back around, trying to keep it coordinated as best we can. And there we go. If you look this time, the picture's a lot closer to what it should be. We're tighter in on the runway. Still not perfect, I'm still out a little bit. But nowhere near what I was on the first circuit. So we want to start reducing our speed again. This time we're going to set our bug down to where we want it. So we're at base, landing gear down, flaps down, begin our turn around, letting the nose drop, bringing the power off. Don't want to put too much rudder in. We're a little high on this one. But not too far. As the runway flattens out, bring that nose up and let the aircraft just bring itself down. There you have it. Flying the circuit is as simple as that. Now, it's not something that comes to you on your first try. And there's no harm in just going up and flying circuits. It's actually a good idea. It allows you to learn more and more how the picture should look and get a feel for what the aircraft's going to do at various stages in the actual circuit. However, the circuit, as we're showing here, which is just a standard circuit, isn't the only type of approach that's flown in the military. On top of the standard circuit, you also have what is known as an initial and pitch. And we're going to take a quick look at what the initial and pitch is, and then attempt to fly one. I say attempt because, like I said before, even I manage to mix things up from time to time. So, we're going to pause the simulator here for a moment, and we're going to go take a look at a couple of images. Here we can see what is known as a standard initial and pitch. The idea of the initial and pitch is that you come down from an initial point, either right or left initial, join in and fly down the dead side of the circuit, brake over the runway, join onto the downwind leg, and then immediately basically fly from there onwards as a standard circuit. It's typically used in formation. It can also be used by single aircraft, especially jets and the like. It's a quick and easy way of getting themselves into the circuit and down on the ground in a hurry. You can even see occasionally the heavies doing these types of flying, such as the C-130. So, in the case of Pierce, we're going to head out about 10 nautical miles, come down on the dead side, which of course is the east side, do a right hand brake over the runway, down, around and land. Rather than actually fly the 10 miles out, I'm going to use the slew. And bring us out a short distance, so we're roughly about the right distance. Doesn't really matter. The other thing is, of course, we're not going to be flying at standard pattern speeds. Instead, we're actually going to be flying a lot faster, about 200 knots or 220. So we're going to bring our throttle up. We're going to maintain our 120 altitude though. And normally on ATC you'd broadcast something like Sierra 99, 5 nautical mile right initial, runway 18 left. Gained a little bit of altitude there. That's okay. We can bleed it off a little bit in our turn, or we can try and get rid of a little bit of it in. In part it's because I didn't have a chance to trim out my aircraft before throttling up. So as you can see, we're doing about 200 knots. We're coming in fairly fast, way faster than the normal pattern altitude. Well, normal pattern speeds. So as I come up and over the runway here, I'm going to cut my throttle and bring the aircraft over into a fairly hefty bank. At the same time, if I feel I need to, also put out the speed brake to help bleed off some of the excess speed. And as you can see, we've come through, we're now basically almost to our base leg. We need to bleed off a little bit more speed. I'm sorry about that, telephone call. So we're bleeding off our speed a little bit. We want to bring our gear down, our flaps down, and start into that base turn. So base 3 green, full stop, because we're going to do a full stop landing this time. Now of course, that wasn't the best turn. I actually made the base turn a little early, and because of the phone call, messed up the actual timing a little bit. But we still managed to recover, and we let the aircraft guide itself down to a nice, easy landing. Now we let it brake itself as much as possible to begin with, before gently applying brake pressure, slowing the aircraft down to a more manageable speed. And at this point you'll notice that our nose wheel steering has come on because it was already on. And we can taxi the aircraft off the runway. At this point we do our, once we're clear of the runway. We wait until we get to the nearest hold short point. So in this the case of this one that we've just taken, the hold short point's just here. Now we clean up our aircraft, make certain that everything's right, and we can take a look at the post-landing checklist. So after landing, we want to put our seat pin in. We don't have to worry about the command ejection. Our air brake is in, our flaps are up. We can turn our probes to the off position. Our landing light can come off if we're not using it for taxiing. Our transponder would go to standby. And our beacon light to beacon. Now we're ready to slowly taxi our way to the bay. I'm going to actually pause the video and continue once we get to the bay. So here we are at just pulling up into the landing bay, or the parking spot, depends on what you want to call it, personal preference. So we pull in, put the brakes on, pull our park brake on, and now we have a look at the parking shutdown check. So the PCL to idle, PCL is at idle. Our park brake is on, our seat pin is in. We want to cage our standby AI. We want to turn our avionics switches off, our inverter off. At this point we want to bring our PCL back to the off position and the engine will start to shut down. The gen master to off. We could ask for our chocks in, and then we're going to turn our nav lights and the like off. So chocks in, nav light beacons off, our oxygen to the off position, and of course our battery master off. Unlock the canopy, open, and we're done. Now in the next couple of lessons we're going to look at planning, VFR flights, IFR flights, and of course what not to do in the PC-9. So that means that there's going to be a little bit of ground school. I'm going to try and cover everything in both free applications and also some payware ones. Just a heads up. Anyway, thanks for watching. My name's Rob. I hope you're enjoying the tutorials.